I'm giving you a little background on Alger Williams. He was born October 11th, 1924. He was the youngest of three boys. And this story, and he was born here in Wright City area. This story kind of hits close to home because right now, because what I have to say is mostly about like when he was active in school. And so right now it's graduation time. So stop and think about, how these boys back in 1942 is when Alger graduated from high school. And so they were all excited and all charged going through high school. And then all of a sudden we have this war going on and so many of them signing up. So he graduated in 1942. He was elected senior class president and several years on the student council, served several years on student council. Alger was quite active with class plays and fundraising for the senior class trip to the Ozarks. Pictures that are being passed around are from the Waller family, showing that they had a really good time on that senior trip to the Lake of the Ozarks. That was a big thing back in the 40s and 50s to go to the Lake of the Ozarks for your senior trip. Alger and his best friend Gwen Waller and Gwen's girlfriend Melba Schneider were quite the trio who remained lifelong friends. Gwen and Melba married and named their oldest son after Alger. In 1943, as the push increased for the need of more soldiers to serve in World War II, many young men from the Wright City area joined to serve in the military forces. The class of 42, out of 24 seniors, 12 were known to have served in the military. An article published in January 7th, 1943 in the Warrenton Banner listed 3 faculty members. One was the superintendent of schools at the time, and 44 other young men who had graduated from Wright City High School who went into the service in 1943. 2 of those men listed were Alger's older brothers, Chester and Harold. Harold was in New Guinea, and Chester was in the Hawaiian Islands. So can you imagine that family had all 3 of their children going to the service? At the age of 19, Alger and Gwen both joined armed forces in December of 1943, just about 6 months after they graduated from high school. They were in the military. They ended up going different directions, never to see each other again. Alger started his training at Jefferson Barracks, then went to Camp Wheeler, Georgia, for 16 weeks. Upon completion of intensive training, Private Williams was then sent to Italy and then on to France. Alger was serving in the 15th Infantry at an outpost in France on a machine gun position when he received a gunshot wound to the abdomen on October 24th, 1944, just 10 months after joining. He was evacuated to the closest military hospital. His parents received word of his injuries, and on 7 days later, on November 1st, 1944, Alger, at the age of 20, died as a result of those injuries. His parents once again received notice from the War Department. Alger was the second young man of Wright City community to give his life in the war, and the first from the town itself. The Wright City community mourned with his family. Private Williams was buried in France. 3 years after the World War II ended, his remains were returned to the United States, just as they were for Daniel Luther. They arrived in New York aboard the United States Army transport Lawrence Victory in May of 1948. The Lawrence Victory carried the remains of over 4,000 Americans who lost their lives during World War II and were returned at the request of next of kin from temporary military cemeteries in France. Private Williams' remains were then transported to the American Graves Registration Distribution Center at Kansas City. Private Alger Williams was finally returned to his hometown and laid to rest in the Wright City Cemetery on June 13, 1948. A memorial service was held. Lydia Volley Gruen, a former teacher of Alger's, wrote this tribute. Insofar as I knew, Alger is the first of my schoolboys to make the supreme sacrifice in giving his life for our country. He was a most cheerful and helpful boy, and as I have watched him grow to manhood, know he continued to be his cheerful self. While God has transplanted his life from the garden of earth to the garden of heaven, his spirit of helpfulness and uprightness lives on. His home was an ever-welcome place, and I cherish the memory of associations with him, his brothers, and his parents. Alger was survived by his parents, Arthur and Deanna, and his two brothers, and his grandmother, Louise Bruning. Today we pay tribute once again to Private Alger Williams and say thank you for his service.